It's okay. We need to go now. But what if? We trust them. Come with me.
I understand this may be difficult to hear, but the committee has made a decision.
I, I can't believe this. I don't know what to do. Mom, look at me. It's gonna be okay.
I found it. It's all here.
The moment. My husband smiled across that conference room table and calmly said, "Nobody can prove anything." I thought he had already won. My hands were trembling. My daughter Melissa looked heartbroken. The attorney lowered her eyes, and every person in the room seemed ready to believe Daniel instead of me. Then the lights dimmed. The large screen behind him flickered to life as Michael Brooks walked in carrying a recovered hard drive. "We finally restored the missing security footage," he said. For the first time in months, Daniel's confident smile disappeared. "If you've ever been made to question your own memories by someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your story. Please like this video if you enjoy heartfelt family dramas, subscribe if you'd like to follow this journey to the very end, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference." When people asked how Daniel and I met, I used to smile before I answered. It happened when I had already stopped looking, I'd say. Looking back now, I realize that was exactly why I never saw him coming. After my first husband, Thomas Grant, died from a heart attack nearly 25 years ago. I poured everything I had into raising our daughter Melissa. I worked as an elementary school librarian in Columbus, Ohio until retirement. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Books, neighbors who waved every morning, church on Sundays, dinner with Melissa whenever her shifts at the hospital allowed, and occasional weekends with my grandson Noah. It was enough. Loneliness doesn't always arrive with loud tears. Sometimes it settles into the empty chair across the dinner table. Sometimes it waits beside the untouched second coffee mug. Sometimes it whispers when holidays end and everyone drives back to their own homes. I was 51 when I met Daniel Cole. He seemed like the answer to a prayer I hadn't dared say out loud. We met during a fundraising event for the Columbus Literacy Foundation. I had volunteered to organize donated books, and Daniel was representing a financial planning company that sponsored educational charities. While everyone else rushed through polite conversations, Daniel stayed behind helping me carry heavy boxes after the event. "You shouldn't be lifting these alone," he said with an easy smile. I laughed. "I've been moving books for 30 years. That doesn't mean you still have to." It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was something smaller, something that made me feel noticed. Over the next several months, Daniel kept appearing in my life almost naturally. We'd run into each other at charity events, community dinners, or concerts in the park. He always remembered little things I'd mentioned before: how I preferred Earl Grey over coffee, how I hated driving in heavy rain, how my knees ached every winter. He listened. Or at least I believed he listened. At 64, Daniel had a reputation that anyone would admire. He worked as a financial consultant, helping families prepare for retirement. He volunteered on the executive board of Riverside Community Center. Neighbors described him as generous. Church members praised his kindness. People trusted him. Eventually, I did too. When he proposed 2 years after we met, Melissa hugged me. "If he makes you happy, Mom, then I'm happy." There was a pause before she added quietly, "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't disappear into someone else's life." I laughed. "What does that even mean?" "It means, keep being you." At the time, I thought she was worrying for no reason. I wish I had listened more carefully. The first few years of our marriage were everything I had hoped for. Daniel loved routines. Every Saturday morning we'd visit the farmer's market. Every Wednesday evening we'd eat at the same family-owned Italian restaurant. Every autumn we'd drive through Hocking Hills just to admire the changing leaves. People often stopped us. "You two are such a beautiful couple. I hope my marriage looks like yours someday." You can tell Daniel adores you. I believed every word. There were photographs everywhere. Christmas dinners, community picnics, anniversary trips. Daniel always had one arm around my shoulders. Looking through those pictures now still hurts. Not because they're fake, but because my smile was real. Mine wasn't pretending. His was. About a year into our marriage, Daniel brought up finances. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else," he said one evening while we were washing dishes. "I suppose. Now let me take care of you." I smiled. "I already take care of myself." "I know." He dried another plate before continuing. "But why make life harder? You've got retirement income, investment accounts, savings, different passwords, different statements arriving every week." He wasn't wrong. Keeping track of everything had become tedious. "I handle finances for families every day," he continued gently. "I could organize everything into one place." It sounded practical. Nothing more. He didn't ask for control. He offered convenience. There's a difference. Or at least I thought there was. At first, he simply helped me organize paperwork. Then he created spreadsheets. Then he suggested online banking alerts. Then he asked if we should combine some household expenses. Every step seemed completely reasonable. Every decision felt mutual. Months later, I realized something frightening. I couldn't remember exactly when I'd stopped making financial decisions. It hadn't happened overnight. It had happened one small favor at a time. One evening, Daniel walked into the living room carrying a folder. "I've updated our monthly budget. I trust you." Those 3 words left my mouth without hesitation. He smiled warmly. "I'll always protect us." I believed him. Melissa visited often despite her demanding schedule as an emergency room nurse. One afternoon, while Daniel was mowing the lawn, she helped me prepare lunch. She casually asked, "Who pays the household bills now?" "Daniel does. Everything. Mostly." She looked at me. "Do you still check your accounts?" "I don't need to." "Why not?" "Because Daniel keeps track of everything." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sliced tomatoes into perfect little pieces. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, I know he's good with money." "He is. But I hope you still know where everything is." I laughed. "You sound suspicious." "I'm cautious. There isn't much difference. There is when someone else controls your future." I waved her concern away. "Honey, Daniel isn't like that." She forced a smile. "I hope you're right." Later that afternoon, I mentioned the conversation to Daniel. He chuckled softly. "Melissa's protective. She always has been." "That's because she grew up watching you handle everything alone." He placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "One day she'll realize she doesn't have to worry anymore." His words soothed me. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see then. Whenever someone questioned him, he never became defensive, he became reassuring, and reassurance is often far more convincing. As the years passed, Daniel slowly became the person everyone called whenever financial questions came up. Friends asked his advice. Neighbors sought his opinion. Church members thanked him for helping with retirement planning. People admired him, including me. He often reminded me that married couples should trust each other completely. No secrets, he'd say. No separate lives. It sounded romantic. What I didn't recognize was that our lives weren't simply becoming shared. Mine was slowly disappearing into his. The strange part is that nothing dramatic happened. No arguments, no threats, no demands. Just hundreds of tiny decisions that slowly shifted every responsibility from my hands into his. If someone had asked me then whether I felt controlled, I would have laughed. Daniel never raised his voice. He never insulted me. He never told me I couldn't do something. He simply became the one who always did it first. Paid the bills, answered financial questions, opened the mail, stored important documents, renewed insurance, scheduled meetings, handled investments. I convinced myself I was fortunate. Friends envied me. "You finally found someone dependable." "I wish my husband handled everything." "You're lucky." Lucky. That word echoes differently now. Because sometimes the safest looking harbor is where the strongest currents quietly pull you away from shore. I just hadn't realized I was already drifting. For a long time, I believed memory was like the books I had spent my career protecting. You might forget where you placed one for a while, but eventually you'd find it sitting exactly where it belonged. I never imagined someone could quietly move the books while convincing me I had misplaced them myself. The first thing that disappeared was my mother's pearl bracelet. It wasn't expensive. Most jewelers probably wouldn't have valued it at more than a few $100s. But my mother had worn it every Sunday to church, and after she passed away, she slipped it into my hand just days before she died. Promise you'll wear it when you need to remember you're stronger than you think. I kept that bracelet inside a small velvet box in my bedroom dresser. One Saturday morning, while getting ready for a charity luncheon, I opened the drawer. The box was there, the bracelet wasn't. At first I assumed I had moved it. I searched every drawer, every jewelry case, every bathroom cabinet. Nothing. Daniel looked up from reading the newspaper. "What are you looking for?" "My mother's bracelet." "The pearl one?" "Yes." "I haven't seen it." I continued searching. "I know I put it in the dresser." He folded his newspaper carefully. "Are you sure?" His question sounded harmless. Of course I was sure. Wasn't I? I think so. You wore it to church a couple of weeks ago. I remember. Maybe you left it somewhere afterward. That explanation seemed reasonable. After all, I had gone to lunch with Linda afterward. Perhaps I had removed it at home later. Perhaps I had placed it somewhere unusual. By bedtime, I still hadn't found it. Daniel rubbed my shoulder. "It'll turn up. It always does." I wanted to believe him. 2 weeks later, another strange thing happened. I couldn't find the folder containing Thomas's military records and our old family photographs. I kept them inside a locked fireproof safe in the upstairs closet. Only Daniel and I knew the combination. When I opened the safe, the folder simply wasn't there. Everything else remained exactly where it should have been. Insurance papers, property tax records, birth certificates. The folder alone had vanished. I stood there staring into the safe for several minutes. Daniel found me. "Everything okay?" "The blue folder is gone." "What blue folder?" "The one with Thomas's military papers." He frowned. "I thought you moved those months ago." "No. I'm almost certain you did." I shook my head. "I don't think so." He smiled gently. "Ruth." Whenever he said my name that way, I immediately relaxed. "You've had a lot on your mind lately." "I know. You probably reorganized things and forgot." It sounded possible. I had cleaned the closet several months earlier. Maybe I had placed the folder in another cabinet. For the next 3 days, I searched every room in the house. Nothing. Not one trace. Melissa came over that weekend after finishing a 12-hour hospital shift. She found me surrounded by open boxes in the guest bedroom. "What happened?" "I can't find your father's papers." She immediately started helping me search. Unlike Daniel, she didn't begin by questioning my memory. She asked practical questions. "When did you last see them?" "About a month ago." "Who had access to the safe?" "You and Daniel." She looked toward the kitchen where Daniel was making coffee. "You didn't loan them to anyone?" "No." She nodded slowly. "We'll find them." Daniel walked in carrying 3 mugs. "Still looking," Melissa answered before I could. "Yes." He sighed sympathetically. "Your mom has been under a lot of stress." Melissa looked at him. "What stress?" "You know." He shrugged casually. "Getting older changes little things." I laughed nervously. "I suppose that's true." Melissa didn't laugh. She simply watched Daniel for several seconds before changing the subject. After she left, Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "She worries too much. She's always been protective." "I know." He kissed my forehead. "But you don't need everyone treating you like you're fragile." His words felt comforting. Today they make my skin crawl. Because he wasn't defending me. He was deciding who controlled the conversation. The strange disappearances continued. A checkbook, an old life insurance policy, the spare key to our storage unit, a silver serving spoon my grandmother had owned. None of these items disappeared dramatically. They simply ceased to exist. Every single time Daniel had an explanation. You probably packed it away. You lent it to someone. You moved it during spring cleaning. You forgot. Always the same ending. You forgot. At first I argued, then I questioned myself. Eventually I apologized. I'm sorry, I'd tell him. I must be getting absent-minded. He would smile with heartbreaking patience. It happens to everyone. One afternoon I drove to the grocery store. Halfway there I suddenly couldn't remember whether I had locked the front door. The uncertainty overwhelmed me. I turned around. When I arrived home, Daniel looked surprised. Everything all right? I couldn't remember locking the house. He chuckled softly. You did. How do you know? I watched you. I laughed with him. But inside something frightened me. Not because I'd forgotten, because I couldn't remember whether I had forgotten. The difference matters. A few days later, Linda Harper invited me to lunch. She had known me for over 35 years, long before Daniel, long before retirement. She listened quietly while I described everything that had been happening. I feel ridiculous, I admitted. I keep losing things. Linda stirred her iced tea. Have you seen a doctor? No. Any family history of dementia? No. She leaned back. Ruth. What? I've known you since you were 26. So, you remember birthdays I forget. I smiled. You remember everyone's children's names. I used to work in a library. You remember books people borrowed 20 years ago. I laughed. I did. So why would your memory suddenly collapse overnight? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I had been asking myself the same question. When I came home, Daniel was preparing dinner. He looked cheerful. How was lunch? Nice. What did Linda think? About what? You've been worried about forgetting things. I stared at him. I hadn't told him what Linda and I discussed. He smiled. I just assumed. Had he? Or had he been expecting it? That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time in our marriage, I quietly got out of bed and walked through the house. I checked the dresser, the safe, the filing cabinet, the pantry. Nothing looked unusual, yet everything suddenly felt unfamiliar. Not because the house had changed, because my confidence had. I sat alone in the dark living room until sunrise. As the first light crept through the windows, I asked myself a question I never thought I would have to ask. Was I really becoming the forgetful woman Daniel kept gently describing? Or was someone carefully rewriting my reality, one missing object at a time? I still didn't know the answer. But somewhere deep inside me, beneath all the confusion and self-doubt, a tiny voice refused to disappear. It whispered something I wasn't yet brave enough to believe. Maybe I wasn't losing my memory at all. Maybe I was losing something far more dangerous. My trust. The morning everything truly changed began like dozens of other mornings. Daniel was already awake when I came downstairs. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the kitchen, and soft jazz played from the little speaker on the windowsill. He stood at the counter in his usual blue button-down shirt reading financial news on his tablet while scrambling eggs. He looked up and smiled. Good morning, beautiful. For years, those words had made me feel safe. That morning, they felt strangely rehearsed. Morning, I replied, forcing a smile. Sleep all right, I suppose. He studied me for a second. You still thinking about those missing papers? A little. He walked over and kissed my forehead. We'll find them. There it was again. Not you'll find them. We'll find them. As though he were standing beside me. As though he were helping. As though he had nothing to hide. After breakfast, Daniel left for an executive board meeting at Riverside Community Center. I'll probably be home around 4, he said while grabbing his leather briefcase. Take your time. I always do. He smiled before walking out the front door. The house became wonderfully quiet. For the first time in weeks, I decided to sit down with my laptop and review our finances myself. Not because I distrusted Daniel. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I simply wanted reassurance. I logged into our joint checking account. The password worked on the second attempt. Daniel had changed it months earlier and told me afterward. I'd written the new one inside a notebook because I was afraid of forgetting it. That realization alone made me uncomfortable. I used to memorize dozens of passwords without difficulty. Now I depended on notes. Or perhaps I depended on Daniel. The account loaded. At first glance, everything looked normal. Utility payments, insurance, property taxes, our grocery expenses. Then I noticed 3 withdrawals that I didn't recognize. $28,000, $14,600, $32,000. Each transaction had occurred within the previous 7 months. I blinked. Surely I was reading something incorrectly. I opened each transaction. Electronic transfer. Authorized. Completed. I frowned. I had never transferred amounts that large. Perhaps Daniel had. But why hadn't he mentioned it? I opened our savings account. Another large withdrawal. Then another. The numbers blurred together. Nearly $100,000 had quietly disappeared over the past year. My breathing became shallow. No, I whispered. There has to be a mistake. I searched through older statements, more transfers, investment liquidations, certificates of deposit closed early, money moving from one account to another. Everything appeared legitimate. Everything carried my electronic authorization. I leaned back in my chair. My hands had started shaking. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe we had discussed these investments. Maybe I had forgotten. I hated that thought. Yet it arrived automatically now. Every unusual discovery immediately became another reason to question myself. I called the bank. After several minutes on hold, a representative named Angela answered. Good morning. How may I help you today? I have a question about several transfers. She verified my identity. What would you like to know? I don't remember approving these withdrawals. I can see the authorizations attached. Can I receive copies? Certainly. They'll appear in your secure message center this afternoon. Thank you. When I hung up, I sat perfectly still. Perhaps the documents would explain everything. Perhaps Daniel had simply forgotten to tell me. By early afternoon, the files arrived. I downloaded the first authorization form. At the bottom sat my signature. At least, it looked like my signature. I stared at it for nearly a minute. The letters were correct. The flow looked familiar. Yet something bothered me. The R in Ruth usually curved slightly to the left. This one curved outward. The final E looked unusually stiff. Tiny differences. Almost impossible to notice. Almost. I printed the document. Then I retrieved an old birthday card I'd signed for Noah. I placed both signatures side by side. My stomach tightened. They looked alike, too alike, almost as if someone had copied my handwriting instead of naturally writing it. I kept comparing them. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe every signature changes over time. People don't sign their names exactly the same forever. I knew that. Still, something felt wrong. I heard the front door open. Daniel was home earlier than expected. I quickly gathered the papers into a folder. Ruth. I'm in the study. He walked in carrying his briefcase. Working. I was checking our bank statements. He froze. Only for a fraction of a second. If I hadn't already been paying closer attention, I might never have noticed. Then the smile returned. Find anything interesting? There were several large transfers. Oh. He loosened his tie. I wondered when you'd notice those. You did? Of course. He laughed lightly. I told you about them months ago. You did? Yes. He sounded so certain that my confidence immediately weakened. We refinanced some investments and moved money into more stable accounts. I don't remember. You agreed. He stepped beside me. There should be authorization forms. There are. He glanced at the printed pages. See? My signature looks. I hesitated. Different. Daniel smiled with patient sympathy. Ruth. He placed one hand gently over mine. Have you ever compared signatures from 20 years apart? No. They're never identical, I suppose. Besides, he looked directly into my eyes. You signed those while recovering from your knee surgery. I searched my memory. Had I? The surgery had been almost 2 years earlier. Medication, pain, physical therapy. Perhaps I really didn't remember clearly. I was probably distracted. Exactly. His answer came too quickly. He squeezed my hand. This is why I handle these things. So you don't have to worry. There it was again. The same comforting explanation, the same gentle confidence, the same invitation to doubt myself instead of him. That evening, Melissa stopped by after work. She looked exhausted, still wearing her navy blue scrubs beneath a light jacket. You all right, Mom? I've had a strange day. Daniel excused himself to answer a phone call upstairs. As soon as he disappeared, I handed Melissa the printed documents. She quietly read every page. These are big transfers. I know. Did you approve them? I honestly don't know anymore. She looked at me with concern. Mom, I don't remember. She compared one signature to another. Then she looked back at me. Can I ask you something? Anything. When was the last time you personally met with your financial advisor? I stopped. Daniel was our financial advisor now. Or rather, he had become the person handling every conversation. I don't know. When was the last time you personally initiated one of these transfers? I can't remember. Melissa remained silent for several seconds. Then she asked the question no one else had dared to ask. Mom, what if your memory isn't the problem? I stared at her. What do you mean? What if someone has simply convinced you that it is? A chill traveled down my spine, because the thought had crossed my own mind. Many times. I had simply been too frightened to say it aloud. That night after Melissa left, I couldn't sleep. Daniel was already breathing softly beside me. I slipped quietly out of bed. Downstairs, I opened a kitchen drawer and found a small notebook. On the first page, I wrote today's date. Then I listed every conversation I had remembered, every transaction, every missing item, every explanation Daniel had given, every doubt I still carried. If I truly was becoming forgetful, the notebook would prove it. But if I wasn't, then it would become something far more important. It would become the first record of a woman who had finally decided to trust her own mind again. I closed the notebook and hid it behind a row of old cookbooks where Daniel would never think to look. For the first time in months, I wasn't collecting memories. I was collecting evidence. And I had a feeling I was going to need every single page. The notebook became my closest companion. Every morning before Daniel woke up, I wrote the date at the top of a new page. Every evening after he had fallen asleep, I added everything I could remember from that day. Conversations, phone calls, receipts, times he left the house, times he returned. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would matter to anyone else. But for me, each sentence was another promise that I would never again let someone else tell me what I had lived through. I didn't realize it then, but that little notebook was slowly rebuilding something I had almost lost. My confidence. About a week after I started keeping notes, something unexpected happened. I was watering flowers in the front yard when our next-door neighbor Harold Benson wandered over carrying his morning newspaper. Harold was 73, retired from the postal service, and knew practically everyone in our neighborhood. Morning, Ruth. Good morning. He smiled toward our driveway. Daniel already gone, board meeting. Busy man. He certainly stays busy. Harold hesitated before speaking again. I almost stopped by last Thursday. Oh. I saw Daniel loading several storage boxes into his SUV. I frowned. Storage boxes? Yeah. I figured you two were cleaning out the basement. I shook my head slowly. We weren't. He looked surprised. Really? I don't remember any boxes. Harold scratched his chin. Maybe I'm mixing up the days. What did they look like? The heavy banker boxes. The white ones with blue lids. My heartbeat quickened. Those were exactly the boxes we used for important documents. Did you happen to see where he took them? No. He drove off before I walked over. I thanked him and tried to keep my voice steady. As soon as Harold disappeared inside his house, I opened my notebook. Date, time, neighbor's statement, description of boxes. Every word mattered. That afternoon, I quietly checked the basement. No empty spaces, no obvious signs that anything had been removed. If Daniel had taken documents, he had done it carefully, very carefully. A few days later, I met Linda Harper for coffee. She immediately noticed I looked different. "You've stopped apologizing." "What do you mean?" "You used to begin every sentence with 'maybe I'm wrong.'" I hadn't realized she was right. Instead of answering, I told her what Harold had seen. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Ruth." "Yes." "There's something I've never mentioned." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "About 4 months ago, Daniel asked me something odd." "What?" "He wanted to know whether Riverside Community Center still used the old hallway security cameras." I blinked. "Why would he ask that?" I asked him the same question. "What did he say?" He laughed. Linda mimicked his relaxed tone. "Old habits die hard. I noticed cameras everywhere." I waited. There was more. He wanted to know which ones actually recorded and which ones were just visible as a deterrent. A chill ran down my arms. "What did you tell him?" I said I had retired years ago. I had no idea. I certainly didn't know. She looked directly into my eyes. At the time, I assumed he was making conversation. And now, I don't think so. I stared into my coffee. Daniel had never mentioned asking Linda about cameras. Why would he? What possible reason could he have? Unless… No, I wasn't ready to finish that thought. The following Saturday, Daniel suggested we attend a fundraising gala at Riverside Community Center. Normally, I loved those events. This time, I dreaded every minute. People greeted Daniel everywhere we walked. "Daniel, so good to see you. Still keeping everyone financially organized." He smiled modestly. "Oh, I just try to help." Watching him was unsettling. He looked exactly like the man I had married. Warm, patient, reliable. If I hadn't lived inside our marriage, I would have trusted him too. Halfway through the evening, Daniel was pulled into a conversation with several board members. I wandered toward the refreshment table. That's when an older maintenance employee recognized me. "Mrs. Cole." "Good evening." He smiled politely. "I haven't seen you in a while." "We've both been busy." He nodded. "I saw your husband last month." "Oh." "He came by after everyone left." I frowned. "Late? Almost 9. What was he doing?" The man shrugged. "Said he'd forgotten some paperwork." I led him back inside. "Was anyone else here?" "No." "Just him." He paused. "Actually, yes." He asked whether the hallway cameras had finally been replaced. I felt my pulse quicken. "What did you tell him?" "That the replacement had been delayed again." He laughed. "Our budget never moves as fast as we'd like." I forced myself to smile. "Thank you." As I walked away, my thoughts raced. Linda, now this employee, both remembered Daniel asking about cameras. Why? Later that evening, Daniel found me standing near one of the hallways. "What are you looking at?" "The cameras." He glanced upward. "Oh, they're old." "You noticed?" "I notice everything." He laughed. "The security director keeps complaining about replacing them." "Do they still work?" He shrugged casually. "I've heard half of them don't." The answer sounded rehearsed, as though he had already prepared it. That night, after we returned home, I added another full page to my notebook. Harold, Linda, maintenance employee. 3 different people. 3 separate conversations, all pointing toward one uncomfortable truth. Daniel cared far too much about security cameras. The next afternoon, Noah came over to help me install shelves in the garage. At 16, he had grown taller than I was. He inherited Thomas's quiet nature. He rarely interrupted people. Instead, he noticed things others overlooked. While organizing old storage bins, he called out, "Grandma." "Yes." "Whose boxes are these?" I walked over. They were ordinary banker boxes. Except, one of them carried Daniel's handwriting. "Archived client files." I frowned. "Those shouldn't be here." "What do you mean?" "He keeps business files in his office." Noah lifted one. It's empty. The next box, also empty. The third, empty again. Only dust remained inside, as though documents had recently been removed, or recently stored somewhere else. I opened my notebook once more. Noah watched me writing. Grandma. What? You're keeping records. I am. He nodded thoughtfully. Good. I smiled. You think so? He looked at me with surprising seriousness. My history teacher always says memories change, but written facts don't. For a 16-year-old, it was an unusually profound observation. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. That's very wise. He smiled shyly. I guess. That evening, Daniel noticed the notebook sitting beside my chair. What's this? Oh. I closed it casually. I've started journaling. He smiled. That's wonderful. Really? Of course. Writing keeps the mind active. His words sounded encouraging, but something flashed across his face, just for a heartbeat. A look so brief that another person might have missed it. Not anger, not fear, calculation. He was wondering what I had written. For the first time since our marriage began, I didn't volunteer the answer. Instead, I smiled back. Oh, it's mostly recipes and little memories. He relaxed almost instantly. I'd love to read it someday. Maybe. I slipped the notebook back into the kitchen drawer after dinner. Except, I didn't leave it there. As soon as Daniel went upstairs to shower, I quietly retrieved it and hid it inside an old cookie tin, beneath bags of holiday decorations in the attic. If I had truly become forgetful, hiding it made no difference. But if my instincts were finally right, then I had just hidden the most valuable thing I owned. Not because it contained proof, not yet, but because for the first time in months, it contained something Daniel could no longer control. My version of the truth. And deep inside, I had the unmistakable feeling that he was beginning to realize I had stopped doubting myself. I spent 3 days debating whether I should call attorney Patricia Reynolds. Every time I picked up my phone, another voice inside my head whispered the same question. What if Daniel is right? What if you're embarrassing yourself because you've forgotten everything? Those doubts had become so familiar that they no longer sounded like fear. They sounded like reason. On the fourth morning, I drove to Patricia's office anyway. Her practice occupied the second floor of a restored brick building in downtown Columbus. Unlike the sleek corporate law firms I'd imagined, her office felt welcoming. There were bookshelves filled with estate planning manuals, framed photographs of families, and a large window overlooking the courthouse square. When the receptionist led me inside, Patricia stood and greeted me with a warm handshake. Mrs. Cole, please call me Ruth. Only if you call me Patricia. Her smile immediately put me at ease. She waited until we were both seated before speaking again. What brings you here today? For a moment I couldn't answer, because saying it aloud made it real. I think, my voice cracked. I think my husband may be lying to me. Patricia didn't interrupt. She simply waited. I've lost important family documents. My bank accounts have large withdrawals I don't remember authorizing. There are papers with my signature. I slid the copies across her desk. But something about them feels wrong. She didn't react immediately. Instead, she carefully arranged every document into neat stacks. Tell me about your husband. I described Daniel, his career, his reputation, his volunteer work, his kindness, his patience. The more I spoke, the more uncomfortable I became, because none of those descriptions sounded like the man capable of fraud. Patricia listened without judgment. When I finished, she asked one question. Has he ever made you feel as though your memory couldn't be trusted? I stared at her. Yes. How often? I thought about it. The missing bracelet. The family papers. The bank transfers. Passwords. Appointments. She nodded slowly. And every time he had an explanation. Yes. Did those explanations make sense? Usually. But afterward, did you feel more confident? She paused. Or less confident? I swallowed. Less. Patricia leaned back in her chair. I'd like to show you something. She reached for a legal pad and drew 2 circles. One she labeled facts, the other she labeled confidence. When people genuinely develop memory problems, she explained, they often become frustrated because the facts disappear. She tapped the first circle. But people who are being psychologically manipulated usually lose confidence first. Then she tapped the second circle. The facts are still there. They've simply been convinced not to trust them. A chill spread through my body. She wasn't diagnosing me. She wasn't accusing Daniel. She was describing exactly how I had been living. I need you to understand something, Ruth. What? I'm not saying crimes have been committed. Not yet. But I am saying your instincts deserve to be taken seriously. No one had said those words to me in months, perhaps years. Your instincts deserve to be taken seriously, I almost cried. Instead, Patricia picked up the authorization forms. Let's look at these. She examined each page carefully. She wasn't a handwriting expert, but she noticed details immediately. The signatures are very consistent. Is that unusual? Not necessarily. She reached for another document. Do you sign your name exactly the same every time? I don't think so. Most people don't. She laid my birthday card beside the authorization form. The differences are subtle. I noticed them. So did I. She looked up. I'd like copies of every financial document you can obtain. I can do that. I also want property records, insurance paperwork, estate planning documents, anything involving your signature. I nodded, writing every instruction into my notebook. Then Patricia asked another question. Has your estate plan changed since you married Daniel? I don't know. She looked surprised. You don't know? I thought everything stayed the same. She opened her computer. Let's verify that. Within minutes, she searched the county property records and several public filings. Her expression changed. What is it? There are amendments. Amendments. Several. I've never amended anything. She turned the monitor toward me. There listed under our names were documents I had never seen before. Property updates, financial directives, estate revisions. Some had been filed almost 3 years earlier, others only 18 months ago. I've never been here, I whispered. I never signed these. Patricia remained calm. We don't know that yet. But we are going to find out. She printed copies of every filing. As she organized them, one date caught my attention. September 14. I frowned. Why does that matter? I was in the hospital that day. She looked up immediately. For what? Knee replacement surgery. Are you certain? I remember because Melissa stayed with me. Daniel barely left the hospital. Patricia reached for her calendar. Do you know approximately what time you were admitted? Very early. She made another note. If these documents were signed that afternoon. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to, because we were both thinking the same thing. How could I have attended a legal signing while recovering from surgery, unless someone else had? Patricia closed the folder. I'd like permission to request certified copies. You have it. And I recommend something else. What? Don't confront Daniel. I looked at her. Not yet. Why? If there is misconduct, people who believe they've been discovered often begin destroying evidence. The sentence landed heavily. Destroying evidence, not hiding it, destroying it. I suddenly thought about Harold's banker boxes, the empty storage cartons Noah had found, the missing family papers, the bracelet, everything. For the first time, all those separate moments began fitting together. Not perfectly, but enough to reveal the outline of something frightening. Before I left, Patricia handed me a business card. If anything unusual happens, she paused. Anything at all, call me immediately. I will. Driving home felt different than driving there. When I had arrived that morning, I feared I might be imagining everything. Now I carried something stronger than certainty. Validation. Not proof, but validation. Someone else had looked at the same facts and reached the same uneasy conclusion. Daniel's explanations no longer sounded comforting. They sounded convenient. As I turned onto our street, I noticed Daniel's SUV already in the driveway. He had come home early again. I parked beside him and walked toward the front door. Before I reached the porch, I froze. Daniel was standing in the living room window, watching me, not reading, not working, just watching. The moment our eyes met, he smiled warmly and waved. But something inside me tightened, because for the first time I wondered whether he had been watching for something else. Not me. The folder in my hands. I tucked Patricia's documents beneath my coat before opening the front door. Daniel greeted me with his usual gentle smile. "How was your afternoon?" "Nice." "Did you have lunch with Linda?" "No." "Shopping?" "A few errands." He nodded. I was beginning to worry. His voice remained perfectly calm, perfectly affectionate, perfectly believable. But now I heard something beneath it. He wasn't making conversation. He was gathering information. And for the very first time in our marriage, I lied. "Oh," I said lightly. "I didn't do anything important." Lying to Daniel should have terrified me. Instead, it gave me an unexpected sense of freedom. For nearly 10 years, I had answered every question honestly. I told him where I went, who I met, what I spent, and even what I was thinking. It wasn't because he demanded those things. He had simply created a marriage where openness felt natural. Now I wondered whether my openness had become his greatest advantage. The morning after my visit with Patricia Reynolds, I woke before dawn. Daniel was still asleep. His breathing was slow and steady, one arm stretched across the bed exactly where it always rested. Looking at him in the dim morning light, he appeared peaceful, familiar, safe. That was the hardest part. People imagine manipulation wearing an angry face. In reality, it often wears the face of someone who kisses you goodnight. I quietly dressed and went downstairs. Instead of making coffee immediately, I retrieved my notebook from the attic. I added another entry. Daniel asked detailed questions about my afternoon. He assumed I had been shopping or meeting Linda. He watched me arrive home from the living room window. I lied about where I had been. He appeared satisfied. I underlined the last sentence. He appeared satisfied. That detail mattered. If Daniel truly believed I was becoming forgetful, why was he so interested in tracking my movements? I barely had time to return the notebook to its hiding place before I heard footsteps on the stairs. "You're up early," Daniel said cheerfully. I couldn't sleep. He wrapped his arms around me while I poured coffee. "Everything all right?" "I'm fine. You've seemed distracted lately." "I suppose I have." He gently rubbed my shoulder. "Maybe you're carrying too much stress." There it was again. Stress, fatigue, age, memory. Every concern I raised eventually circled back to me, never to him. After breakfast, Daniel announced he needed to meet several clients across town. "I'll probably be gone until dinner. Drive safely." "I always do." Once he left, I called Melissa. "Can you meet me?" She immediately recognized something in my voice. "Is everything okay?" "I think so. I just need to talk." "I'll take an early lunch." An hour later, we sat together in a quiet corner of a small cafe near the hospital. I told her everything Patricia had discovered. The estate amendments, the dates, the documents filed while I had been recovering from surgery. Melissa listened without speaking. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "I knew something wasn't right. I should have listened to you." "No." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You trusted your husband. That isn't something to be ashamed of." Tears filled my eyes. "I keep thinking about all the times I defended him." "You loved him. I still don't understand how someone can pretend for so many years." Melissa looked out the window for a moment. "Maybe he wasn't pretending all the time." "What do you mean?" "Maybe parts of him were real. But the part that wanted control was stronger." Her answer somehow hurt more than if she had simply called him evil, because evil is easier to recognize than selfishness. A selfish person can still laugh with you, comfort you, celebrate anniversaries, then quietly betray you when you're looking the other way. Before returning to work, Melissa gave me one piece of advice. Don't be alone with this anymore. I won't. If he starts making you question yourself, she paused. Call me immediately. I promise. That afternoon, I stopped by Linda Harper's house. She was trimming roses in her front yard. I was hoping you'd come. You were. I've been thinking about Daniel. We carried 2 glasses of iced tea onto her back porch. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Linda broke the silence. There's something I never mentioned because it seemed unimportant. What is it? Last year, Daniel asked me whether retired dispatchers could still request old incident reports. I frowned. What did you tell him? I said no. He laughed and said he was just curious. She looked directly at me. I've been replaying that conversation. Why? Because curiosity wasn't the expression on his face. What was it? Calculation. The word echoed inside my mind. It was the same expression I had seen when Daniel noticed my notebook. Not anger, calculation, as though he were always measuring risk, always staying 3 steps ahead. When I returned home later that afternoon, Daniel's SUV was already parked in the driveway. He was sitting on the porch drinking iced tea. Perfect timing, he called. I was just thinking about you. I visited Linda. His smile didn't fade. Oh, she wanted gardening advice. Another lie. Another small piece of information he couldn't verify. He nodded casually. How's she doing? Well? Good. His reaction was almost disappointingly ordinary. If he suspected anything, he certainly wasn't showing it. That evening, while Daniel showered upstairs, I quietly searched his home office. I wasn't looking for dramatic evidence, just something, anything. His desk drawers were perfectly organized, tax files, client folders, office supplies, nothing unusual. Then I noticed something odd, a locked drawer. I had never seen it locked before. I searched the desk. No key. Just as I was closing the drawer, I heard the bathroom door upstairs open. My heart nearly stopped. I hurried back into the hallway just as Daniel began descending the staircase. He smiled. What are you doing? I was looking for envelopes. Oh, they're in the kitchen. Thank you. He walked past me toward his office. For one terrifying second, I thought he might notice the desk drawer wasn't sitting exactly as before. Instead, he simply entered the room and closed the door. 5 minutes later, he emerged carrying several client folders. No mention of the locked drawer. No accusation. Nothing. That night, I lay awake long after Daniel had fallen asleep. I couldn't stop thinking about that drawer. What required a lock inside a house where only the 2 of us lived? The next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Reynolds. Good morning, Ruth. Is everything all right? I received certified copies of those estate amendments. My pulse quickened. And there's something you need to see. What is it? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Is it bad? There was a brief silence. Then Patricia answered carefully. The signatures aren't what concerns me most. I frowned. What does the witnesses? Witnesses. Every amendment required 2 independent witnesses. I don't recognize either name. I searched my memory. I don't either. One appears to have retired from a mobile notary service. And the other, Patricia's voice became quieter. The second witness passed away almost 18 months before one of the documents was supposedly signed. I couldn't breathe. What? That's why I'd like you to come in tomorrow morning. Are you saying? I'm saying the timeline doesn't make sense. When the call ended, I sat motionless in my kitchen. Until that moment, I had believed Daniel might have manipulated me. Now, for the first time, I realized something far more disturbing. Someone hadn't simply lied to me. Someone had created legal documents that appeared impossible. A dead witness. An amendment signed while I was recovering from surgery. Missing family records. Disappearing money. One by one, the puzzle pieces were locking together. I looked toward the hallway. Daniel was humming softly as he shaved in the upstairs bathroom. The sound echoed through the house with the comforting familiarity of countless ordinary mornings. Anyone passing by would have envied my peaceful life. Only I knew that somewhere inside this quiet home, the man I had trusted most, had built an entire world out of carefully arranged lies. And for the first time, I no longer believed those lies could stay hidden much longer. The next morning, I arrived at Patricia Reynolds' office 15 minutes early. I barely noticed the familiar brick buildings outside or the steady rhythm of downtown Columbus, beginning another workday. My mind was fixed on one sentence. A witness who had already died. It sounded impossible. Patricia greeted me with a solemn expression that immediately confirmed this meeting would be different from the last. "I've made copies for you," she said as she handed me a thick folder. I sat down across from her. She opened the first document. "This is the amendment transferring survivorship rights on one of your investment accounts." I nodded. "You told me you don't remember signing it." "I don't." She pointed toward the signature line. "I've requested certified copies directly from the county recorder and the financial institution." Then she turned to the witness section. "The first witness, Karen Mitchell, retired as a mobile notary nearly 5 years ago." "What did she say?" "I reached her yesterday." My heartbeat quickened. "She has no memory of meeting either you or Daniel." "Could she simply have forgotten?" "Possibly." Patricia paused. "But that's not the important part." She slid another document toward me. "The second witness listed is Edward Simmons." I looked at the name. He died 18 months before this document was supposedly signed. Silence filled the room. I stared at the page without blinking. There was his signature. A signature belonging to a man who could not possibly have been present. Patricia spoke carefully. "At minimum, something is seriously wrong with these records." I whispered, "How could this happen?" "There are several possibilities. Administrative error, identity misuse, or," she stopped, "or fraud." The word hung heavily between us. For weeks I had danced around that possibility. Now someone else had finally said it aloud. Patricia closed the folder. "I've also reviewed your hospital records. You were admitted for knee replacement surgery at 6:10 that morning." I remember. "You were under anesthesia when one document claims you appeared before witnesses that afternoon." I slowly shook my head. "I couldn't have." "No, you couldn't." For the first time in months, I wasn't questioning my own memory. The facts themselves were beginning to speak. Patricia folded her hands. "I still recommend patience. I know this is difficult, but we need evidence that can withstand scrutiny." "I understand. I've already contacted a forensic document examiner." My eyes widened. "Really?" "She'll compare your genuine signatures with the questioned ones." "How long?" "A few weeks." Weeks. Every day suddenly felt unbearably long. Before leaving, Patricia handed me a legal envelope. "Keep every new bank statement, every receipt, and continue writing in your notebook." I smiled faintly. "I haven't missed a day." Contemporaneous notes often become very valuable. As I walked toward my car, my phone buzzed. It was Noah. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, sweetheart. What are you doing today?" "Just running errands." "Can I come over later?" "Of course." "I found something weird in the garage yesterday." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What did you find?" "I'll show you when I get there." I don't really want to explain it over the phone. His tone was calm, curious, not frightened. Still, I felt my pulse quicken. That afternoon, Noah arrived carrying his backpack. Daniel wouldn't be home until evening, leaving us several quiet hours together. "So," I asked, "what did you find?" Instead of answering, Noah walked straight into the garage. He climbed onto a stool and reached behind an old camping cooler on the highest shelf. "I noticed this yesterday." He pulled down a dusty manila envelope. I almost ignored it. The envelope was sealed with yellowed tape. There was no label, no writing, just years of dust. "I don't remember this." Neither did I. Noah carefully peeled the tape away. Inside were several folded receipts, instruction manuals, warranty cards. Nothing important. Then a small thermal paper receipt slipped onto the workbench. Noah picked it up first. "What is this?" I leaned closer. The paper had faded, but the print remained readable. Across the top were the words, Midwest Digital Recovery Services. My stomach tightened. Below that was a description. Data recovery, security video archive date, invoice number, payment received. I frowned. What exactly is digital recovery? Noah shrugged. Recovering deleted files. My heart skipped. The receipt was dated just 6 days after the afternoon, when Daniel later insisted the Riverside Community Center cameras had malfunctioned. I remembered that conversation perfectly. He had come home irritated. The cameras weren't working today. The system keeps failing. He had laughed about it. I'd believed him. Now I stared at the receipt. Why would anyone pay nearly $2,000 to recover security footage? If the cameras hadn't recorded anything, I sat down slowly. Noah looked at me. Grandma, I think... I struggled to finish the sentence. I think this might matter. He examined the receipt again. The customer name is cut off. Only part of it remained visible. Cole, not enough to identify anyone with certainty, but enough to make my heart race. Noah looked thoughtful. Should we tell Mom? Yes. And Patricia. That evening, Melissa came over immediately after work. She read the receipt twice, then a third time. This could be nothing. I know. But it could also be everything. Melissa nodded. We shouldn't jump to conclusions. I agree. Let's ask someone who actually understands security systems. The next morning, I scanned the receipt and emailed it to Patricia. Less than 2 hours later, she called. I've done a little checking, and Midwest Digital Recovery specializes in restoring damaged surveillance recordings. I closed my eyes. So I understood the receipt correctly. Yes. But here's the interesting part. They don't work directly with homeowners very often. They mostly contract with businesses, shopping centers, hospitals, community facilities. My pulse began pounding again. Like, community centers. Exactly, Patricia continued. I also made one more phone call. To whom? The current director of security at Riverside Community Center. I held my breath. His name is Michael Brooks. He confirmed the center had a partial camera system failure about 2 years ago. Several recordings became inaccessible. What happened to them? He believes an outside recovery company attempted to restore the files. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table. Did they succeed? I don't know. He wasn't working there yet. But, she paused. He offered to search the archived maintenance records. My heart pounded louder than ever. Maintenance records, recovery invoices, security footage. For weeks, every clue had pointed toward the cameras. Now, for the first time, someone was actually looking for the recordings themselves. After ending the call, I walked into the backyard. The late afternoon sun warmed my face, but I barely noticed. I kept replaying one memory. The evening Daniel casually told me the cameras had failed. At the time, it had sounded like meaningless conversation. Now every word carried new weight. Had he been disappointed because they worked? Or relieved because he believed the footage had disappeared forever? I didn't know. Not yet. But one thing had changed. Until now, every clue had depended on memories. Missing jewelry, missing documents, suspicious signatures, conflicting stories. The receipt was different. It wasn't based on what anyone remembered. It existed. Someone had paid to recover surveillance footage. And somewhere buried in old maintenance files or forgotten backup drives, there was a chance, just a chance, that the cameras Daniel had dismissed years ago had seen far more than he ever imagined. For the next 4 days, my life seemed to exist in 2 different worlds. On the outside, everything looked exactly the same. Daniel still kissed me goodbye every morning before leaving for work. He still asked whether I needed anything from the grocery store. He still complimented my cooking and reminded me to wear a jacket whenever the evenings grew cool. If someone had watched us from across the street, they would have seen an ordinary retired couple living a peaceful life. Inside my mind, however, every hour stretched into an endless wait. I checked my phone constantly, hoping Patricia or Michael Brooks would call with news about the security footage. Every vibration made my heart jump. Every unknown number made me stop breathing for a second. Most of the time it was nothing. Spam calls, Medical appointment reminders, church announcements, never the answer I was waiting for. On Friday afternoon, while Daniel was in his backyard trimming hedges, my phone finally rang. Ruth. It was Patricia. I've spoken with Michael Brooks. I immediately walked into the laundry room and quietly closed the door. What did he find? He searched through Riverside's archived maintenance records, and the receipt Noah found matches one of their old service requests. I gripped the edge of the washing machine. So the recovery company really worked for Riverside? Yes. They were hired after a partial storage failure affected several hallway cameras. I closed my eyes. The footage existed. It certainly appears that way. But here's the problem. My stomach tightened. What problem? The recovered files were transferred onto an external archive, and no one knows where it is. Silence filled the room. So, it's missing. The word landed like a stone. Missing. Again. Everything important in my life seemed to disappear. Jewelry, documents, money, now surveillance footage. I leaned against the wall. Do they think it was destroyed? Michael isn't sure. He says Riverside changed security contractors about 18 months later. Many of the old records were boxed and placed in long-term storage. Hope flickered again. So it might still exist. It might. Michael wants permission to search every archived storage room. When? He already started. After hanging up, I stood in the laundry room for several minutes. Outside the window, I could see Daniel carefully trimming rose bushes. His movements were calm, precise, methodical, exactly like every decision he made. If he had hidden evidence, I doubted he had left obvious clues. That evening, I barely spoke during dinner. Daniel noticed. You seem quiet. Just tired. Too many errands. I suppose. He studied me for a moment. You've been going out more lately. I have. It's good. His smile remained warm. I worried you'd become isolated after retirement. There it was again. Concern. Always concern. Never suspicion. Never accusation. If I hadn't already begun seeing through him, I might have mistaken it for love. The next morning, Melissa stopped by before work. I updated her about Michael's search. So the footage could still be somewhere. Yes. She smiled for the first time in days. That's something. It is. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly. I know waiting is hard. I've waited this long. You won't be waiting forever. I wanted to believe her. Monday arrived. Nothing. Tuesday. Still nothing. Wednesday morning, I received another call. This time it was Michael Brooks himself. Mrs. Cole, please call me Ruth. Of course. I thought you'd want an update personally. My pulse immediately quickened. You found something. I'm not sure yet. But I wanted to explain what we've discovered. I sat down. I'm listening. Our old security contractor stored archived hard drives inside a locked records room. Unfortunately, the room hasn't been opened in several years. Why not? Flood damage. I frowned. There was a pipe leak. The archives were relocated. But the inventory wasn't completed. So nobody knows exactly what's there. Exactly, he continued. My team has opened 47 storage boxes, mostly paperwork, old maintenance manuals, retired computer equipment. No video archives. Disappointment washed over me. I'm sorry. Don't be. We still have another section to search. How much? He laughed softly. More than I'd like. After the call ended, I realized something important. Michael wasn't helping because Patricia had asked. He genuinely wanted the truth. That mattered. The following afternoon, Noah came over after school. He found me staring absent-mindedly through the kitchen window. No news. Not today. He sat beside me. You know. What? My computer science teacher says deleted files usually aren't really gone. I smiled. Really? They're just harder to find. I hope that's true, he grinned. I think it is. His optimism reminded me of Thomas. My first husband had believed every problem could eventually be solved if someone refused to quit. Perhaps Noah had inherited more from his grandfather than his quiet personality. Thursday evening, Daniel suggested we go out for dinner. You've looked stressed. It'll do us good. We drove to our favorite Italian restaurant, the same one we'd visited nearly every Wednesday for years. The waitress recognized us immediately. The usual table. Daniel smiled. If it's available. Throughout dinner, he seemed unusually attentive. He refilled my water before I asked. He ordered my favorite dessert. He even reached across the table and held my hand. I've missed this. So have I. That wasn't entirely a lie. I had missed the man I thought he was. Halfway through dessert, Daniel asked casually, "Have you spoken with Patricia Reynolds lately?" The spoon froze halfway to my mouth. What makes you ask? I thought Melissa mentioned her. Oh, he shrugged. I must have misunderstood. A tiny alarm sounded inside my mind. Melissa had never mentioned Patricia in front of him. Not once. I forced a smile. I haven't seen her. He nodded slowly. Good. Why good? I don't like seeing you worry yourself over legal paperwork. It's unnecessary stress. His answer sounded perfectly reasonable. Yet one word echoed in my thoughts. Legal. How had he known the subject involved legal matters I hadn't told him? Melissa hadn't told him. No one had. When we arrived home that evening, I immediately wrote the conversation into my notebook. Every word, every pause, every expression. For the first time, I wasn't simply recording events. I was recording inconsistencies. Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. Michael. This time his voice sounded different, more excited. Ruth. Yes. I think we found something. My heart pounded so loudly I barely heard the rest of his sentence. We located an old evidence cabinet that wasn't listed on the relocation inventory. What was inside? Several external hard drives. I covered my mouth. Are they labeled? Some are. And one label reads. He paused as papers shuffled in the background. Hallway camera archive. My breathing stopped. But don't get your hopes up just yet. The drive hasn't been tested. It could be damaged. It could be empty. It could contain unrelated footage. I understand. We're sending it to a recovery specialist first thing tomorrow morning. When will you know? If we're lucky. He hesitated. Early next week. After we ended the call, I remained standing in my living room staring at the silent phone in my hand. For months I had searched for missing papers, missing jewelry, missing money. Now somewhere inside a forgotten storage cabinet there might be something far more valuable. Not another memory, not another opinion, not another accusation. The truth itself. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something Daniel had never considered. He had spent years controlling what people believed. But cameras don't believe, they simply remember. The call from Patricia came on a gray Tuesday morning. Michael wants everyone present when we examine the recovered drive. I gripped the phone tighter. Everyone, you, me, yes, Melissa, myself, Michael, and Daniel. I closed my eyes. So, this is really happening. It is. Patricia's voice remained calm. We still don't know what's on that drive. It may contain nothing useful. I understand. But if it does... She let the sentence fade away. I already knew. Everything could change. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at Riverside Community Center. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed happier than he had been in weeks. He hummed while making breakfast. He joked with neighbors. He even surprised me with flowers. They're beautiful, I said. I thought they'd cheer you up. Thank you. His kindness hurt more than cruelty ever could. Because every gentle gesture forced me to ask myself one final question. Had any part of our marriage been real, or had every smile simply been another tool? Thursday arrived far too quickly. Melissa insisted on driving me. You don't need to face this alone. The 30-minute drive felt strangely silent. Neither of us knew what to say. As Riverside Community Center came into view, I felt my stomach twist. The building had once represented some of my happiest memories. Holiday fundraisers, book fairs, charity dinners, volunteer projects. Now it felt like a courthouse. Michael Brooks greeted us at the entrance. He looked more serious than I had ever seen him. "Mrs. Cole, thank you for coming. Is everything ready?" He nodded. "The recovery specialist completed his work yesterday. And I'd rather explain inside." That answer told me everything. Something had been recovered. Whether it helped us remained another question. The conference room occupied the second floor. Large windows overlooked the community gardens. Normally, the room hosted planning meetings and charity committees. Today, it felt impossibly small. Patricia Reynolds sat at one end of the table arranging folders. A laptop connected to a large television screen rested near the center. Several external hard drives lay beside it. Daniel entered only a few minutes later. He looked surprised to see everyone gathered. "What's all this?" Michael stood. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole." Daniel smiled politely. "Of course." "I wasn't given many details," Patricia answered. "We've been reviewing several historical property and financial documents." Daniel glanced toward me. His expression remained perfectly composed. "I see." He sat beside me and quietly whispered, "Is everything all right?" I looked at him. "I guess we're about to find out." He gently squeezed my hand. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation." Even then, even with uncertainty hanging over every person in the room, he sounded completely confident. Michael closed the conference room door. "I'd like today's discussion to remain respectful." Everyone nodded. Patricia began. "Over the past several weeks, we've identified several inconsistencies involving financial documents connected to Ruth Cole." Daniel frowned. "Inconsistencies?" "Yes." She calmly reviewed everything: the questioned signatures, the impossible witness dates, the estate amendments, the bank transfers. Daniel listened without interruption. When she finished, he folded his hands together. "I'm sorry Ruth has been distressed." His voice sounded compassionate. "I truly am." He looked toward Patricia. "But none of this proves wrongdoing." "No," Patricia agreed. "It doesn't." He nodded. "People forget. Documents contain clerical errors. Witnesses retire. Names get entered incorrectly." Everything he said sounded reasonable, measured, professional, exactly the kind of explanation an experienced financial consultant would offer. Melissa leaned forward. "What about the money?" Daniel answered calmly. "Every transfer was authorized." "My mother doesn't remember authorizing them." "I'm aware." He looked at me with heartbreaking sympathy. "Memory changes." There it was again. Always memory, never evidence, always my mind, never his actions. Michael remained silent, watching, listening. Daniel continued speaking. "I've spent years helping families prepare for retirement. I would never intentionally harm Ruth." He reached into his briefcase. "I actually brought copies of our investment summaries." He slid neatly organized binders across the table. "I thought they might answer everyone's questions." I stared at him. He had prepared. Of course he had. He always prepared. Patricia examined the binders briefly before closing them. "Thank you. But today's meeting isn't primarily about investment performance." Daniel smiled. "No. No. It's about determining whether certain events occurred." He leaned back comfortably. "And how exactly do you intend to do that?" The room became very quiet. Michael finally spoke. "We recovered archived security records." Daniel's eyes moved toward the laptop, only for an instant. Then he smiled again. "Security records? Yes, do with this," Michael answered. "Neither did we." At first, Daniel chuckled softly. "Well, I'm certainly curious." I watched him carefully. His breathing remained steady. His posture never changed. His confidence seemed almost impossible. Melissa, however, looked increasingly anxious. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Mom, what if there's nothing useful?" I quietly squeezed her hand. "I know." Truthfully, I had been asking myself the same question all morning. Patricia stood. "We should be clear. The recovered archive may not contain relevant footage. It may contain damaged files. It may contain nothing connected to today's concerns. Daniel nodded confidently. Exactly. He looked around the room before smiling. I think we're all letting imagination run ahead of facts. No one answered. He continued. I've been accused of manipulating Ruth, stealing from her, forging signatures, moving documents. He spread his hands calmly. But accusations aren't evidence. His voice remained perfectly steady. He looked directly at Patricia. You know that. I do, she replied. He turned toward Michael. And old hard drives don't magically create crimes. Michael said nothing. Daniel looked at me. His expression softened. Ruth, I love you. I hate seeing you frightened. If I've made mistakes, I'll apologize. But I won't apologize for crimes I didn't commit. The room fell silent again. For one terrifying moment, I almost believed him. That frightened me more than anything, because if I could still doubt myself after everything we'd discovered, then perhaps he really had spent years teaching me not to trust my own instincts. Daniel slowly stood from his chair. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. Then with absolute certainty he smiled at everyone in the room. You've searched documents. You've questioned witnesses. You've looked through old records. And after all that, he shrugged almost casually. Nobody can prove anything. His words echoed through the conference room. No one moved. No one spoke. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself breathe. Then, knock sounded at the conference room door. Everyone turned. Michael glanced toward the hallway before quietly opening it. A young forensic technician stood outside holding another portable drive. I've finished verifying the recovered files, he said. Michael accepted the drive without speaking. Then he walked back into the room. He placed the small device beside the laptop. For the first time since entering the building, Daniel's smile faltered, only slightly, barely enough for anyone else to notice. But I noticed, because it was the first genuine expression I had seen on his face in months. Michael looked around the room. I think, he said quietly, it's finally time to see what the cameras remember. No one spoke. The conference room had become so quiet that I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner above us. Michael Brooks rested his hand on the portable drive for a brief moment before plugging it into the laptop. I want everyone to understand something, he said calmly. What you're about to see is recovered material. Some files were damaged. Some timestamps required reconstruction. Our forensic specialist verified that the recordings themselves were not altered during recovery. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Then let's get on with it. His confidence had returned, but it looked different now. It felt forced. Patricia folded her hands on the table. We're ready. Michael clicked the mouse. A list of folders appeared on the screen. Hallway A, reception. Finance office corridor, archive hall, storage entrance. Each folder contained dozens of short video clips. They're arranged by date, Michael explained. We focused on the week surrounding the property amendment and financial authorization documents. Daniel gave a small shrug. I'm sure you'll discover employees walking through hallways. No more than that. No one answered him. Michael opened the first clip. The image appeared grainy, but clear enough to recognize faces. A timestamp glowed in the upper corner. Riverside Community Center, 6:48 p.m. The hallway outside the records office looked empty. For nearly 30 seconds, nothing happened. Melissa shifted nervously beside me. This can't be it, she whispered. Then someone entered the frame. Daniel. He wore the same navy blazer hanging in our bedroom closet. He looked younger by a couple of years, but there was no mistaking him. He unlocked the records room with a keycard. Michael paused the video. Mr. Cole, he said evenly, did you have authorization to access this office after hours? Daniel barely glanced at the screen. I was on the executive board. I frequently handled financial paperwork. Michael nodded. So entering the office isn't unusual. Exactly. He sounded relieved. The video resumed. Daniel disappeared inside. Nearly 12 minutes passed. He emerged carrying a thick blue file box, the same size Harold Benson had described seeing in our driveway. Daniel calmly walked down the hallway and disappeared from view. The recording ended. He smiled faintly. "So," Patricia answered, "nothing illegal so far." "I agree." Daniel folded his arms. "Thank you." Michael opened the second clip. This one showed the opposite hallway from another angle. Again, Daniel entered the records room. Again, he carried the same file box. Only this time before leaving, he looked carefully in both directions. Then he closed the office door. He didn't walk toward the administrative wing. He headed toward the storage corridor. Michael paused the video again. "Our building maps show there was no board meeting that evening." Daniel shrugged. "I was organizing archived paperwork. No rule prohibited that." Still calm, still confident, still impossible to read. Michael opened another clip. The timestamp was 43 minutes later. The camera overlooked the storage corridor. Daniel entered carrying the file box. He unlocked a storage room, went inside, came back out empty-handed, locked the door, walked away. Melissa frowned. "What was in that room?" Michael answered. "Old financial archives." Daniel immediately spoke. "Exactly. I told you. I was filing documents." His explanation sounded perfectly reasonable. I felt disappointment settling into my chest. Had we really come this far for ordinary footage? Patricia remained unusually calm. "Continue." Michael nodded. The recovery specialist noticed something interesting. He opened another folder. This camera covered the same hallway from a different direction. The screen changed. The quality improved noticeably. A wider angle, the storage room door, the hallway, the records office entrance in the distance. Daniel again appeared carrying the blue file box. This time he stopped halfway down the hall. He looked behind him, looked ahead, then opened the box. Instead of walking directly into storage, he removed several folders. One by one, he separated them. Some went back into the box. Others he tucked beneath his arm. Then he entered the storage room carrying only part of what he'd removed. Melissa inhaled sharply. "What happened to the rest?" Daniel answered before anyone else could. "I probably reorganized them." Michael clicked forward. Daniel exited the storage room. The blue box remained inside. The loose folders were gone. He brushed dust from his jacket and walked away. Again, nothing conclusive. Daniel smiled. "I appreciate everyone's effort. But we're still watching me move paperwork." He looked toward me with almost theatrical sadness. "Ruth, I'm sorry this has become so painful." I couldn't answer, because a terrible fear had begun creeping back into my heart. What if this was all there was? What if every clue led nowhere? Michael reached for another folder. "There are only 3 recovered clips left." Daniel spread his hands. "Please." "I'm curious." The 4th recording began. This one came from inside the records office itself. Everyone in the room leaned forward. Shelves lined the walls. Metal filing cabinets stood against one side. A large work table occupied the center. The timestamp matched the evening Daniel had entered after hours. For several moments, he simply sorted documents, opened cabinets, compared folders. Exactly what a board member might reasonably do. Then, he stopped. He looked directly toward the office door, waited, walked across the room, closed the blinds covering the interior window. Melissa whispered, "Why would he do that?" No one answered. Daniel himself remained silent. He returned to the work table, opened the blue file box, removed several property files, then another folder, one marked, Cole Family Estate. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. Michael paused the frame. "Mrs. Cole, do you recognize that label?" "Yes." My voice barely existed. "That was our estate file." Michael resumed playback. Daniel opened the folder, carefully removed documents, compared several pages. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out another stack of papers, placed them beside the originals. The room became completely silent. He slowly exchanged several pages, original documents into his briefcase, replacement documents into the estate folder. Melissa covered her mouth. "Oh my God," Daniel finally spoke. "That proves nothing." His voice remained controlled. I may have been replacing outdated copies. Patricia didn't respond. She simply watched. The recording continued. Daniel closed the folder, returned it to the cabinet, locked the drawer, then collected the original papers into his briefcase. He left the room. The screen froze. No one moved. Daniel looked around the table. Those could have been duplicate records. No one can tell from silent video. He still sounded confident, but there was something different now. His breathing had become slightly faster, his jaw noticeably tighter. Michael quietly opened the final folder. This recording, he said, was recovered separately. It came from a hallway camera we initially believed was completely corrupted. Daniel's eyes fixed on the screen. For the first time since the meeting began. He didn't smile. The file loaded slowly. The recovery software reconstructed damaged frames one by one. The hallway appeared. Then Daniel. He carried no briefcase this time, only a thin leather portfolio. He stopped beside a small reception desk, removed several blank sheets of paper, laid them flat, looked around. Then he began writing. Again, and again, and again. The same signature, over and over, my signature. R, pause. U, pause. T. The movement was unmistakable. He wasn't writing notes. He wasn't filling out forms. He was practicing the way I signed my own name. The room fell into absolute silence. Even the air conditioner seemed louder. Frame after frame showed him repeating the same signature, discarding one sheet, starting another, studying an older document, copying it again, improving, adjusting, until finally, he nodded to himself, placed one perfected page into the leather portfolio, gathered every practice sheet, folded them carefully, and walked away. Michael stopped the recording. No one spoke. Melissa stared at this frozen screen in disbelief. Patricia slowly removed her glasses. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. Everything inside me had gone strangely calm. Not because I was no longer frightened, because after months of doubting myself, after questioning every memory, after wondering whether I was losing my mind, I had just watched the truth with my own eyes. Across the table, Daniel remained perfectly still. For several long seconds he said nothing. Then, in a voice far quieter than before, he cleared his throat. That's... He stopped. Tried again. That's not what it looks like. For the first time since I had met him 10 years earlier, Daniel Cole had no convincing explanation ready. For several long seconds, no one in the conference room moved. The frozen image of Daniel practicing my signature remained on the screen, illuminating the room with a pale blue glow. It was no longer simply a suspicion or a collection of unsettling coincidences. It was a moment, a real moment, captured years earlier by a camera that had never cared about appearances, reputations, or carefully rehearsed explanations. Daniel slowly looked around the room. His face remained remarkably composed, but I noticed something I had never seen before. His eyes were searching, not for compassion, for escape. He cleared his throat. I can explain. No one interrupted him. Patricia Reynolds folded her hands and quietly replied, We're listening. Daniel exhaled slowly before speaking. I often practiced Ruth's signature. Melissa's head snapped toward him. You, what? He nodded as though the statement were perfectly ordinary. Ruth has arthritis in her hands. Some days signing documents was painful. I practiced her signature so I could guide her hand. I stared at him. What? He finally looked directly at me. You remember? No, I don't. You were frustrated because your handwriting changed after surgery. His voice remained calm. I was trying to help. For years that tone had comforted me. Now it sounded rehearsed. Patricia didn't react emotionally. Instead, she asked a simple question. So you're acknowledging that the person on the video is you? Of course. And you're acknowledging those practice signatures resemble Ruth's? Yes. But there was nothing improper. They were only exercises. Michael Brooks quietly advanced several frames. The image zoomed closer. The screen now showed Daniel studying one of my original signatures beside several blank sheets, then carefully reproducing it again, and again, and again. Patricia spoke softly. Why would anyone need dozens of practice attempts if the goal was merely helping someone's hand movement? Daniel hesitated. For consistency. Melissa almost laughed. Consistency? My mother has signed her own name for 60 years. She doesn't need lessons. Daniel ignored her. I was trying to make paperwork easier. Patricia remained perfectly composed. And replacing estate documents, Daniel answered immediately. Administrative corrections. The originals contained outdated information, so you removed them personally. I was helping. Michael changed the video back to the earlier clip showing Daniel exchanging documents. This recording shows you removing original papers. Daniel nodded. Yes. And inserting replacement documents. Correct. Were those replacement documents approved by Ruth? Yes. Do you possess written authorization? Silence. Daniel looked toward me. Ruth knew. I met his eyes for the first time since the videos had started. No. I didn't. He smiled sadly. Your memory. No. I interrupted. Not loudly, not angrily, simply clearly. No. The room became quiet again. That single word felt strangely powerful. For months I had doubted every memory, every feeling, every instinct. Now for the first time I wasn't asking Daniel whether my memories were correct. I knew they were. He tried again. Ruth, you've been confused. No. You've forgotten conversations. No. His expression tightened. We discussed these things. No. Every answer became easier, every denial stronger. Patricia turned another page in her file. Mr. Cole. I'd like to discuss the estate amendment dated September 14th. Daniel nodded. What about it? Mrs. Cole was hospitalized that day. Yes. You stated previously that she personally reviewed and approved those documents. She did. Patricia slowly placed hospital admission records beside the certified filing. The timestamp on the amendment indicates it was signed while she was recovering from anesthesia. Daniel didn't answer immediately. I don't recall the exact timing. The documents do. Michael quietly added, the security recording from that same afternoon places you inside the records office. Daniel's jaw tightened. I had board responsibilities. No one disputes that, Patricia replied. What we dispute is whether you had authority to alter estate records. Daniel leaned forward. I never altered them. Michael pressed another key. The paused image enlarged further. The label on the folder became unmistakably clear. Cole Family Estate beside it lay several removed pages. Daniel slowly slid them into his leather portfolio, then inserted another stack. The camera angle now clearly showed two separate document piles. There was no innocent explanation left. Still, Daniel tried. Those were updated copies. Patricia nodded once. Then where are the originals? Silence. No answer. She asked again. Mr. Cole, where are Ruth's original estate documents? Daniel looked toward the window. I don't know. Melissa leaned forward. Because you took them. Daniel ignored her. Patricia continued. And Ruth's missing military records belonging to her late husband. No answer. The missing family photographs. Nothing. The pearl bracelet. He slowly shook his head. I have no idea what happened to those. For the first time, I recognized something in his voice. Not confidence, fatigue. He was running out of explanations. Michael quietly closed the laptop. I have something else. Everyone turned toward him. When we recovered the drive, our forensic specialist also restored deleted system logs. Daniel's head lifted. System logs. Michael nodded. The archive recorded every time someone requested video deletion. He handed Patricia another printed page. She examined it briefly, then looked directly at Daniel. 2 days after these recordings, she tapped the paper. Someone using your executive credentials requested permanent deletion of hallway footage. Daniel's face changed, only slightly, but enough. I don't remember. Patricia didn't raise her voice. The system remembers. Again silence. Then an unexpected voice came from the doorway. I remember too. Everyone turned. An elderly man stood just outside the conference room. Gray hair, dark suit, walking cane. Michael immediately stood. Mr. Hanson. The man nodded politely. I hope I'm not interrupting. Patricia smiled faintly. Not at all. She looked toward us. This is Richard Hanson. He served as Riverside's facilities director before retiring. The older gentleman slowly entered the room. He looked directly at Daniel. I wasn't planning to get involved. But after Michael called, he sighed. I couldn't stay silent. Daniel stared at him. Richard continued. I remember that evening. You insisted the hallway recordings had become corrupted. I believed you. He looked toward me. Mrs. Cole. I'm sorry. I authorized the recovery company because Mr. Cole insisted important board records might have been lost. He paused. When the files were recovered, he looked back at Daniel. You personally requested that I leave everything to you. I trusted you. Daniel finally spoke. You don't remember correctly. Richard smiled sadly. I'm 82. I forget where I leave my glasses. But I never forget the day someone asks me to hand over evidence. The word echoed through the room. Evidence. Not paperwork. Not archives. Evidence. Daniel looked around the conference room one last time. At me. At Melissa. At Patricia. At Michael. At Richard. Every face staring back at him carried the same expression. Not anger. Not revenge. Certainty. The carefully constructed image he had protected for years wasn't cracking anymore. It had collapsed. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel looked genuinely alone. And somehow, that was even more frightening than all the lies he had ever told. Because I realized something profound. Manipulative people don't fear losing arguments. They fear the moment no one believes them anymore. That moment had finally arrived. No one spoke for several moments after Richard Hanson finished. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Daniel remained seated, his hands folded neatly on the conference table. If someone had walked into the room at that exact moment, they might have thought he was simply another businessman attending a difficult meeting. Only those of us who had witnessed the videos understood that the calm on his face was no longer confidence. It was calculation. He was deciding what to save: his reputation, his freedom, or himself. Patricia Reynolds was the first to break the silence. Mr. Cole, she said evenly, I'd like to ask one final question. Daniel looked up. If you believe answering it will help. Did Ruth ever authorize you to replace original estate documents with different versions? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly removed his reading glasses and folded them carefully. I acted in what I believed were my wife's best interests. Patricia did not react. That wasn't my question. I know. So, he sighed. No. The word landed with astonishing force. Melissa looked at me in disbelief. Even Michael lowered his eyes for a moment. Daniel had just admitted he had acted without my authorization. Not a confession of fraud. Not yet. But enough. Patricia quietly made another note. Thank you. Daniel straightened his jacket. I suppose my attorney will advise me not to answer anything further. Patricia nodded. That's your right. He stood. I think we're finished. Michael spoke before anyone else could. No, Mr. Cole. Daniel stopped walking. We're not. Michael reached across the table and handed him a printed document. What is this? A chain of custody report. The recovered footage has now been formally preserved. Copies have already been transferred to legal counsel. Daniel glanced through the pages. His expression remained unreadable. Then he quietly set the document back on the table. I see. Patricia looked toward me. Ruth. Yes. I believe it's time we discuss the next legal steps. I nodded. My voice still wouldn't come. For months I had imagined this moment. I thought I would feel triumphant, victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. When someone you love betrays you, proving the betrayal doesn't erase the grief. It only removes the uncertainty. Daniel slowly picked up his briefcase. Before leaving, he turned toward me. "May I speak with you?" Melissa immediately answered. "No." Daniel ignored her. "I'm asking Ruth." Everyone looked at me. A few months earlier, I would have followed him into the hallway without hesitation. Now I calmly shook my head. "No." He looked genuinely surprised. "Just 5 minutes." "No. We've shared 10 years together." "I know. You owe me that." For a brief moment, I almost gave in. Old habits are difficult to break. Then I remembered every missing document, every bank transfer, every gentle suggestion that I was becoming forgetful, every time I had apologized for things I had never done. I looked directly into his eyes. "I don't owe you another private conversation." His shoulders dropped almost imperceptibly. Then he nodded once. "I understand." Without another word, he walked out of the conference room. The door closed quietly behind him. Only after he disappeared did I realize I had been holding my breath. Melissa wrapped her arms around me. "It's over." I shook my head. "No. It's only beginning." Patricia smiled gently. "That's actually true." She opened another folder. "The evidence we've gathered today is significant. But recovering your assets will still require formal legal proceedings." I expected that. "There are several priorities." She began listing them one by one. "First, we'll petition to invalidate every estate amendment executed without your informed consent." I nodded. "Second, we'll notify the financial institutions that multiple authorizations are under dispute." Michael added, "My office has already secured the surveillance recordings. No one will alter them," Patricia continued. "Third, we'll request a temporary freeze on any remaining joint transfers until ownership questions are resolved." Melissa looked relieved. "So he can't move anything else?" "Not easily." I finally found my voice. "What about the missing originals?" Patricia answered honestly. "We'll try to locate them." "But even if they're gone," she tapped the stack of certified records, "we now have substantial evidence showing they were removed." Richard Hansen slowly stood. Before leaving, he walked over to me. "I owe you an apology. You trusted this organization. I should have questioned more." I gently squeezed his hand. "You believed someone who worked beside you for years." "So did I." He smiled sadly. "Still, I'm sorry." After he left, Michael approached me. "I have something for you." He handed me a small flash drive. "A copy." He nodded. "The footage." I stared at the tiny device resting in my palm. Such a small object, yet it had shattered an illusion that had taken 10 years to build. I never imagined my life would fit on something this small. Michael smiled gently. "Sometimes the truth does." Over the following weeks, everything moved faster than I expected. Patricia filed emergency petitions with the probate court. The banks immediately flagged every disputed transfer. The forensic handwriting examiner completed her report. Her conclusion was clear. The questioned signatures showed strong evidence of simulation rather than natural variation. Several institutions contacted Patricia requesting copies of the surveillance recordings. Daniel resigned from the Riverside Community Center Board before the organization formally voted on disciplinary action. His financial consulting firm placed him on administrative leave. Neighbors who had once praised him now avoided discussing his name altogether. No public spectacle followed, no dramatic arrest, no television cameras. Real life rarely unfolds that way. Instead, consequences arrive through letters, court filings, bank notices, professional investigations, one ordinary envelope after another. A month later, Patricia called me into her office. She handed me another thick folder. "Good news." I smiled nervously. "I'm almost afraid to ask." The court granted the emergency petition. I opened the order. Several estate amendments had been suspended pending final review. Authority over my personal financial decisions had been restored solely to me. Joint transfer privileges were frozen. I looked up. "So, I'm in control again. For the first time in quite a while." Tears filled my eyes before I realized I was crying. Not because of the money, not because of the house, because someone had officially recognized something I had almost forgotten. My judgment mattered. My voice mattered. My signature belonged to me. A week later, I stood alone inside our house. Daniel had already moved into a temporary apartment after receiving legal advice. The rooms felt strangely quiet. I walked into my study and unlocked the small cabinet where I had hidden my notebook. Page after page documented my journey. Fear, confusion, questions, small observations, tiny details. I reached the final blank page. Then I wrote one simple sentence. Today no one asked whether I remembered correctly. For months every conversation had begun with doubt. Now it began with truth. And that truth had finally given me something no court order could ever restore on its own. My faith in myself. 3 months after Daniel moved out, the silence inside my house no longer felt frightening. It felt honest. For the first few weeks I wandered from room to room almost expecting him to appear with another reassuring explanation. Sometimes I would misplace my reading glasses and instinctively think, maybe I'm becoming forgetful. Then I would stop, take a slow breath, retrace my steps. Almost every time I found them exactly where I had left them, on the kitchen counter, beside my favorite chair, inside the pocket of my cardigan. Each small discovery healed something inside me. Not because finding a pair of glasses mattered, because every ordinary moment reminded me that my memory had never been the enemy. Fear had been. Melissa visited nearly every weekend. Unlike before, she no longer came to check on me. She came simply because we enjoyed spending time together. One Saturday afternoon, she walked into the kitchen carrying grocery bags. I brought too much food again. I laughed. You always do. I learned from you. Together we prepared chicken soup while soft music played through the house. The conversation drifted naturally from recipes to Noah's school projects, to neighborhood news, and eventually to subjects we had avoided for years. Melissa quietly stirred the soup before speaking. Mom. Yes. I need to apologize. I looked at her in surprise. For what? I spent a long time being angry. At Daniel. At both of you. She looked down at the cutting board. I thought you kept choosing him over me. My heart ached. I never meant to. I know that now. She smiled sadly. I just couldn't understand why every conversation ended with you defending him. Neither could I. Not anymore. I wasn't defending him, I said quietly. I was defending the life I believed we had. Melissa walked around the kitchen island and hugged me. We have time now. To build something better. Those words stayed with me long after she went home. Building something better, not returning to the past, creating something new. Several weeks later, Patricia called with more encouraging news. The remaining financial review is almost complete. That's wonderful. The court accepted the forensic handwriting report. I smiled. So the signatures. They've officially been declared inconsistent with your natural writing patterns. What about the investment accounts? Most have already been restored. One by one, the practical pieces of my life quietly returned. The disputed transfers were reversed wherever possible. Insurance policies were corrected. Beneficiary records were restored. The amended estate documents were declared invalid. There was no dramatic courtroom speech, no emotional jury verdict, just careful legal work, page after page, signature after signature. Sometimes justice arrives with applause. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork. I was grateful for either. Around that same time, I made another important decision. I sold the house. Not because I had to, because I wanted a fresh beginning. Too many memories lived inside those walls. Some beautiful, some painful, all impossible to separate. Melissa helped me search for something smaller. Eventually, we found a quiet townhouse only 15 minutes from her neighborhood. It overlooked a small park where children played every afternoon. The first morning after moving in, I carried a mug of tea onto the back patio. Birds filled the trees with cheerful noise. A little girl rode her bicycle along the walking path while her grandfather followed behind, laughing. For the first time in years, I felt completely safe. No hidden questions, no careful observations, no wondering whether I had remembered something incorrectly. Just peace. Noah quickly claimed the spare bedroom as his room. I mean, he laughed. My room when I visit. You'll always have one. He spent hours helping me unpack books. Thousands of them. You really kept all these? I was a librarian. What did you expect? He grinned. I expected fewer mysteries. I laughed louder than I had in months. One afternoon, while arranging shelves together, Noah found my notebook. The famous notebook. So you've heard about it. Mom says it saved you. I gently shook my head. No. It reminded me. Of what? That my own voice deserved to be written down. He thoughtfully flipped through the pages. I like how it changes. What do you mean? The beginning sounds scared. He turned several pages. The middle sounds confused. Then he smiled. The last part sounds like you. His observation surprised me. He was right. Without realizing it, my handwriting itself had changed. The early pages were cramped and hesitant. Later entries became larger, stronger, more confident. Perhaps healing leaves marks we don't notice until someone else points them out. A few weeks later, Linda Harper convinced me to attend the community book club. I don't know anyone. You'll know me. What if I feel awkward? You'll survive. She was right. The meetings quickly became one of my favorite parts of each month. We discussed novels, shared homemade desserts, argued about endings, laughed more than I had expected. Nobody there knew my story, and that felt surprisingly comforting. For once, I wasn't the woman whose husband manipulated her. I was simply Ruth, the retired librarian who always brought oatmeal cookies, the woman who recommended historical fiction, the friend who remembered everyone's birthday. One evening after book club, Linda and I walked slowly through the parking lot. You look different. I've lost weight. Not that, she smiled. You've stopped looking over your shoulder. I hadn't realized I used to do that. She was right. Some habits linger after fear disappears. It takes time for your body to believe you're finally safe. Near Thanksgiving, Melissa invited everyone to her house. Just family, nothing fancy. While we set the table, Noah quietly slipped something into my hand. It was a tiny silver charm shaped like an open book. For your bracelet. I smiled. My bracelet disappeared. I know. So I bought you something new. My eyes filled with tears. It isn't replacing Grandma's bracelet, he said softly. It's just the beginning of another one. I hugged him tightly. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone on Melissa's back porch, watching snow begin to fall. Months earlier, I had believed my life was ending. Instead, it had simply been changing direction. Healing hadn't erased what happened. It hadn't restored every missing photograph or every precious keepsake. It hadn't given me back the years I spent doubting myself. But it had given me something else, a future that no longer depended on fear. And as I watched snowflakes settle quietly across the yard, I realized something I never thought I would say again. For the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow. People sometimes ask me whether I hate Daniel. The question usually comes after they've heard pieces of my story. They expect anger, they expect bitterness, perhaps they even expect satisfaction. The truth is more complicated than that. Hatred requires a person to keep living inside yesterday. I spent too many years there already. Today I choose something different. Nearly a year has passed since the afternoon we sat inside that conference room at Riverside Community Center and watched the security footage that changed everything. Sometimes I can still picture the expression on Daniel's face when the recordings began. Not because I enjoy remembering it, because it reminds me how quickly certainty can disappear when it has been built on deception. The legal process continued quietly for several months. Patricia Reynolds kept me informed every step of the way. Some hearings lasted only a few minutes. Others required hours of testimony and documentation. I attended whenever necessary. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth recorded correctly. The court eventually ruled that the disputed estate amendments had been executed without my informed authorization. Every document created through those fraudulent revisions was declared invalid. The remaining joint financial arrangements were dissolved during the divorce proceedings. Several investment accounts were restored to their original ownership. Other funds could not be fully recovered, but enough evidence existed to prevent further losses. Professional licensing authorities also completed their own investigations. Daniel quietly surrendered several professional credentials before formal disciplinary hearings concluded. There were no newspaper headlines, no television interviews, just official letters delivered through certified mail. The consequences arrived exactly the way they should, without drama, without celebration, simply as the result of facts. One afternoon, months after everything had ended, Patricia invited me to her office for what she called our final meeting. When I arrived, she handed me a neatly organized binder. "What is this? Your complete case file." Inside were copies of every important document: the forensic handwriting report, court orders, bank correspondence, property corrections, witness statements, everything. As I turned the final page, I noticed something else tucked into the back pocket: a small flash drive. "The surveillance footage," she nodded. "It's yours." I held the tiny device in my hand. "So this is the copy, one of them. You may never need it again." I smiled faintly. "I hope not." She stood and walked me to the door. Before I left, she said something I have never forgotten. "Most people think this case was about proving fraud." She shook her head gently. "It wasn't. It was about helping one woman trust herself again." I thanked her. Then I drove home thinking about those words the entire way. She was right. Money mattered. Legal documents mattered. Justice mattered. But none of those things had been the deepest wound. The deepest wound had been waking every morning wondering whether my own mind could still be trusted. That injury doesn't appear on financial statements. No court can measure it. Yet it changes everything. Life gradually settled into a rhythm I had once believed impossible. Every Tuesday morning, I volunteered at the local library, reading stories to children. Watching young faces light up over books reminded me why I had loved being a librarian for so many years. Every Thursday afternoon, I attended this community book club with Linda. She still insisted on bringing desserts no one needed. We still argued over novels as though they were matters of national importance. Every Sunday, Melissa, Noah, and I shared dinner together whenever her hospital schedule allowed. Sometimes we cooked, sometimes we ordered pizza, sometimes we simply laughed. Those ordinary evenings became the greatest luxury I had ever known: peace. Noah eventually graduated from high school. During his graduation dinner, he surprised everyone by standing to make a short toast. "I want to thank my mom," he smiled toward Melissa, "for teaching me to work hard." Then he looked at me. "And I want to thank Grandma Ruth." I felt my cheeks grow warm. "For what?" He grinned. "For teaching me something I'll never forget." "What?" He raised his glass. "Always write things down." Everyone laughed. Then his expression became more serious. "And never let someone else convince you that your truth doesn't matter." I don't think anyone at the table had dry eyes after that. Several weeks later, while unpacking another box in my townhouse, I found my mother's old photograph tucked inside one of Thomas's books. I sat on the floor staring at it for a long time. Behind the photograph lay something else: a tiny velvet pouch. Confused, I opened it. Inside rested my mother's pearl bracelet, the one I had believed was gone forever. I honestly don't know how it ended up there. Perhaps Daniel had hidden it years earlier and forgotten. Perhaps it had been misplaced before everything happened. Perhaps someone quietly returned it. The truth is, I never found out. Oddly enough, I no longer needed to. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist. It still fit perfectly. I remembered my mother's final words: "You're stronger than you think." She had been right. Not because I defeated someone, because I survived becoming someone I no longer recognized. Months later, I visited Riverside Community Center for the first time since the investigation. The building looked exactly the same. Families entered through the front doors. Children laughed in the courtyard. Volunteers carried boxes for another charity event. Life had continued. Michael Brooks happened to see me walking through the lobby. "Mrs. Cole." "It's good to see you." "You too." He smiled. You know, what? We replaced every security camera after everything that happened. I heard. He hesitated before adding, I almost threw away those old hard drives. I looked toward the hallway where everything had begun. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. As I prepared to leave, Michael asked one final question. Did you ever watch the footage again? I looked down at the bracelet around my wrist. No. Why not? Because I don't need proof anymore. He smiled. I understand. The truth is, I still keep that flash drive. It rests inside a small wooden box in my bedroom drawer beside my notebook. Not because I want to relive the worst chapter of my life. Not because I expect anyone else to question what happened. I keep it for a much simpler reason. Whenever fear whispers that maybe I imagined everything, whenever old doubts try to return, I remember that somewhere inside that tiny piece of technology is a silent witness that never lied. But these days I rarely think about the recording itself, because the most important evidence no longer lives inside a camera. It lives inside me. I trust my own voice again. I trust my own memories. I trust my own heart. And after everything that happened, I have learned the greatest truth of all. Someone may succeed in hiding documents. They may move money. They may rewrite records. They may even spend years convincing you to question yourself. But the truth has remarkable patience. It doesn't rush. It doesn't argue. It simply waits for the moment when someone is finally ready to see it. And when that moment comes, no one can hide from it forever.